Director Alan Abraham just put in the chat. Do we have a volunteer secretary? It can again be a temporary assignment. It doesn't have to be forever. It can be just for today. Other than Mir, since Mir volunteered before. Oh, thank you, Melissa. Okay. Melissa will be our secretary for today. I appreciate that. And we will go ahead and get started. It looks like we've got 6 of our 9, and I know DeAndre said that they wouldn't be able to make it. Excuse me. So I don't know the status of others. So, but anyway, let me jump over and quick check the agenda and just make sure I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. Okay, I will officially call the meeting to order. So welcome everyone. Welcome Councilmember Mundy and Director Ellen Abraham, even though you're on the phone, and staff and fellow subcommittee members. It is good to see everyone again, and exciting to get moving here. So are there any questions or thoughts or points of order anyone wants to discuss or bring up before we get started? Okay, wonderful. Well, since we have Councilmember Mundy here, we will go ahead and jump into our number 3 agenda item, the status of the non-discrimination ordinance. And Councilmember Mundy, I've got you on the agenda for that. Are you all set to go for briefing us on that? You're on mute.
Yes and no, because I think that really is going to be Angela's role. But she's not able to be with us today, Attorney Carmen. Let's see. When was the last time that we met? Have we passed the ordinance since the last time we met? Okay.
Correct.
Then the update on that is, of course, that on August the 16th, unanimously, the City Council did pass the second part of the non-discrimination ordinance, which will cover employment, housing, and public accommodations. And I know that this was the piece that most of us really wanted to happen. Yep. So we're very grateful for that. There's going to be a little bit of a delay in the start of that. It will, instead of starting December the 1st, it will start on January the 1st. And that is simply to allow the Human Relations Department to put the resources in place. They're going to hire a couple of folks who can be dedicated specifically to this cause, one to investigating and the other to outreach and communication. So they wanted to make sure that they had their resources in place before we start implementing this. So January 1st is our date to go, and very grateful for that. And thank you all for your grassroots support on the NDO. Now you're muted, Josh.
I am muted. That's awesome. I know everyone's super excited about that. So that's, and I know we already knew it, but it's still great to hear. so good stuff. Okay, it looks like we can go ahead and jump to our focus group updates. So we will start with housing. And which is DeAndre and Jake and Melissa and Mir. And if I'm not mistaken, Jake, you sent out the update for this one. Yeah, do you want to go ahead and kind of give us a quick brief on that and pass it along to members as needed?
Sure. And I apologize if I got a little background noise, but I just dropped the link in the chat to the notes from our kind of working group or focus group meeting, whatever we're calling it. But the group that was working on the issue of housing and shelters, we had a couple different questions we were trying to answer. One of those is which groups could offer some kind of LGBTQ competency training or safe zone training for the local shelters. And in the research, we discovered a couple groups that could. DeAndre found that the Fifth Avenue Alliance is a local organization that offers some of this already. but we still don't know how comprehensive. And obviously, it's not a mandatory thing for the shelters, but that was exciting to see that there is a group with some local expertise. I reached out to Equality North Carolina, and they said they'd be happy to provide these services. And I know Equality North Carolina has a relationship with the council and has been working on the NDO and other issues. So if the local group doesn't work out, we've got this statewide group. So there's a couple options to look into. So that's really positive that we've got some groups who can offer those kind of trainings. Some research that I think Melissa got started and worked with some other folks at the city asking about the which shelters actually receive some fundings from the city, or maybe it's these federal funds that get passed through the city, but which of the local shelters and agencies are receiving the funds. And the ones that came up were Bethesda Center, Samaritan Ministries, Salvation Army, and Family Services. So those are some places that if we're able to require some kind of LGBTQ training because you receive funds, these are some places. And that seems like a pretty comprehensive list. Like that's a lot of the spaces around the cities. So that was good news. I saw Attorney Carmen shared some research that while some of the things we had asked about in the last meeting might not be possible with state statutes and laws, this hasn't been ruled out yet. I remember during the last meeting, you said it could be a possibility, and it seems like it's still a thing for further research to see if we can require it. Our subgroup or our focus group also discussed the idea of how do we talk about housing or discrimination issues more broadly than just shelters. And so one notion we came up with was having the city offer some kind of non-discrimination training, some kind of LGBTQ competency training, some kind of non-discrimination intersectional training. And we discussed whether it should be, if we were to go that route, should it be kind of more focused on housing, like pulling in folks from management companies or realtors, transitional housing, or should it be a broader focus where you include areas of public accommodation like florists, hotels, bakers, convention centers, and the list goes on and on. And I know during our discussions, we talked a little bit about the sexual harassment training that we all went through to serve on the subcommittee, how we got to see an example there of a training being offered with good information. There are people in the room asking questions. And so could a training like this be offered, even if it was just on a volunteer basis? So if we can't require the shelters to get this kind of training, maybe the city could offer some kind of intersectional non-discrimination training more broadly, where we can invite people in, encourage them to get involved in that way. So that was kind of how we try to take a broader lens, a broader scope to think about more than just shelters. We also talked about a few other things in terms of, can we move faster than an 18-month timeline, which I know Attorney Carmen mentioned last time that we weren't bound to the 18-month schedule. We could go a little quicker if we wanted to, because we know there's always some delay between approval and implementation and these things actually getting implemented in the field. So I think there was some interest in moving a little faster than 18 months if we could. And to move our next steps along, DeAndre is going to reach out to the Fifth Avenue Alliance to see if they can share some of their materials they use for these trainings and to see if they can come to our next working group meeting. We have our working group meeting once a month, so we're meeting kind of monthly in between the subcommittee meetings so that we can move the work forward ahead of each subcommittee meeting. So we're going to try to get them into our next meeting like that, just to discuss some additional ideas. And then we wanted to share out with this full group the notion of some kind of intersectional non-discrimination training, see if that overlapped with any of the work or ideas that the other working groups had, because this may be broader than housing and shelters. It may be a broader public accommodation, non-discrimination focus. So those were some of the ideas. I suppose I should say, if there's anyone else from that sub-working group who wants to expand on anything I just shared, or if there's anyone who has any questions about what we did, please feel free to ask.
Just a comment, Jake, and my apologies to everyone for my tardiness. I was on a call with county about some other issues, but I just wanted to, I know, Jake, you referenced the city attorney's memo to me to follow up on questions that were posed during the last meeting. And if you look at the last page of the memo, she does mention the fact that the city cannot compel recipients of funding to provide either directly or indirectly training as a condition for receiving the funding. So right now that's being researched to see if there are any exceptions or if there's anything else that we could possibly do. But I just want to make that very clear that we cannot compel them as it stands now to be trained in this manner. We don't have any authority to do that we know of. And so again, she is researching that a little further just to double and triple check, but it doesn't look that way as it stands right now. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I'm just hoping that everybody had an opportunity to look over her memo, because it was very thorough, and there were specific statutes that were referenced, just to be clear, even with respect to MWBE, the expanded definition and so forth. And then of course, with respect to requirements regarding access and use of non-city restrooms, that one was pretty clear as well. So just wanted to make sure you all saw that. I know I missed part of it, part of what was already said, but just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
That's really helpful to know. And I do think one of that is we came up with as a working group was, should we have a more voluntary training that the city offers that we can encourage people to come to? So if we can't mandate it, maybe we can offer voluntary training, whether it's housing focused or more broadly kind of non-discrimination focused for matters of public accommodation. I think that's something to discuss farther, but a volunteer training. And I wonder, this is maybe a slightly separate question. Maybe we can't compel trainings. Can we compel any reporting on the back end about how they work with queer communities or queer youth or anything like that? Like, is that a separate question, or is that just as?
I don't know what can be compelled, because the word compel is a very strong word, legally speaking. And so when you're talking about compelling someone to do something, you need the statutory authority to compel or mandate that they do that particular thing. And so again, I'm sure that that could easily be a part of the additional research, but as it stands, we don't know of anything that we can compel them to do. But again, as far as what you just said in terms of training in general, that is voluntary training and so forth, I think that that shouldn't be a problem. Just to let them know that it's available, maybe encourage them to go through the training and so on. Sometimes that's all it really takes. It's just for other organizations to be encouraged to go through training like that. So we'll just have to, like I said, I don't want you or anyone else to hang your hat on this compel language, because again, that is very strong. And we do have to have authority to do things like that, to mandate such things.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a follow-up question for Wanda. Do you know, will we have a chance to speak directly with Attorney Carmen about this? I just had some clarification questions. Do you know if there's a day when she'll be here when we could ask her more about this?
Yes, Mir. I had emailed you all when I sent this. I mentioned that she wouldn't be able to join us this month, but her plan is to join you for your October NDO meeting. So at that time, I'm sure she would entertain questions and she'll be able to clarify.
Mira, Melissa, do you guys have anything else you'd like to share from the sub meetings?
I'll just add that I was excited that the city's going to be able to do some kind of listing of the North Star Rainbow Directory on the website. I think that's going to be a helpful resource for the community just to get that out in more places. So I appreciate that.
That's
no problem.
Fantastic.
No problem.
Okay, wonderful. Do we have any other questions or any other topics related to housing that anyone would like to bring up or add? Then we will go ahead and move to our next focus group, excuse me, which is economic mobility. And with Jerry not being here, Clint, you get to be put on the spot. How are you doing today, sir?
I am well, thank you so much. Currently, we have no updates. So thank you. We do plan to meet very soon, and then we'll be able to provide updates for October.
Okay, very good. Does anyone have any suggestions or additions in relation to economic mobility? Then we will move on. Our next focus group is outreach visibility. with Clint, Amaris, Jerry, and DeAndre. Clint and Amaris, you're the only two here for it. And since I just put Clint on the spot, Amaris, would you like to give an update here?
Sure. We don't have a update to provide this afternoon for this subgroup either, but we'll be hopefully organizing and have something for October, so, or something to share out with the groups. And
Amaris and Clint, just to help you out a little bit there, I do know that the Human Rights Campaign's scorecard, the Municipal Equality Index, or the MEI scorecard, has been brought up before, I think maybe at the last meeting. And so I think that ties in, or could potentially tie in, with economic mobility and outreach and visibility. And so just to let you know that the city has replied to the Human Rights Campaign with updates pertaining to the NDOs that we now have on the books with respect to employment and public accommodations, and other work that's been done in the DEI realm. And so we have already requested that those additional things be taken into consideration, even though, you know, they've already done the 2020 scorecard, obviously. This is for 2021. And so we are hoping and anticipating that some points will be given to the city to make our score rise a little more than where it is. Understanding, though, that in terms of the actual enforcement and the passage of the NDOs, that did not happen until the current fiscal year. And the current fiscal year began July 1st of 2021. So we're not sure how they're gonna look at that. We're thinking maybe they won't count it until 2022, but they knew that we were going in that direction, and that council had already heard it at the committee level. And so we don't know how they're gonna do the point assignments for that. But I just wanted to mention that I think would have a bearing on outreach, visibility, and also economic mobility potentially, because maybe potential employers would look at that scorecard to try to assess how open and diverse the local community is. So maybe that helps you a little bit with your two reports.
Wanda, just a quick question on timing. When does that MEI scorecard typically come out for the previous year?
If I'm not mistaken, Council Member Mundy, I think it comes out in the fall. Late fall, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong, but okay. I think it's late fall, because they usually will send the current year scorecard in the spring for us to review and to update with anything that we are doing or that we anticipate for the upcoming year.
Okay.
So I think it's fall.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, but we will definitely keep you apprised once we, hear from them and receive the new scorecard.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the update and the questions.
Josh, I do have a quick update as far as outreach and visibility. Right prior to this meeting, Pride Winston-Salem did announce they were postponing the festival and the parade that was scheduled in October 16th, until June of 2022. So that was just announced a few minutes before our meeting.
Unfortunate, but eminently understandable. I'm sorry, Jake, what was that?
Oh, just Winston-Salem having Pride in June, like most of the rest of the nation. That's kind of surprising. We've never done that before. I was curious if Jerry mentioned anything, or if anyone has heard anything about I know it's kind of a separate government avenue for this to happen, but has anyone heard any updates, speaking of outreach, about the possibility of a Pride crosswalk? Because I feel like that would be nice if we're not having a parade this year, if we could get some kind of symbol of visibility. I know last year we met with the mayor and the city council and got out to the steps in front of City Hall and did a photo op with the local queer community and a Pride proclamation. We did that in 2020 with the pandemic having hit. We couldn't do a lot of events, but we at least were able to have the city stand with us and have that kind of activity. And I thought maybe the Pride crosswalk could be this year's kind of symbolic stance, especially if we can't gather as a community.
I feel like I read or heard that they would be able to go forward with it, but it could be too two sections.
That's what I recall as well, Melissa, that we probably would not get all 4, but we could get 2. And they, but the application process requires advising who will be doing the painting. And Jerry didn't know at that point in time he was going to be meeting with the Arts Council to see if they could partner with Pride on providing some talent, if you will. And that's the last I heard on that project. But I agree with Jake. There's no reason why we couldn't go forward with that.
Yes, and I found the email from Jerry that indicated that they could only paint 2 of the crosswalks in the Trade Street, 6th Street intersection.
And that is the latest that I've heard as well. So does anyone know if the application has actually been submitted? Okay, so I think that was the last I've heard, and that's the last email thread that I have seen on it. So that's kind of where we've left it. Jake, you asked about that, right?
Yeah, I was curious to hear where that was at, but I'm glad to hear like it's going to be on Trade Street and 6th Street, that area that's right in Pride Festival territory, the end of the Pride Parade territory. Like the Arts District, like that's such a cool space for it. I'm excited to see our city with that.
Yeah.
But the application does have to be submitted. I think that was emphasized in this email thread that I'm looking at. I think DOT, the Deputy Director of Transportation was advising that was needed.
Okay, well, we can check in with Jerry either through email or next meeting to see if he's got any updates on that. Okay, wonderful. Any other questions on outreach visibility or thoughts? Okay. The next 2 are mine, City Facilities and Social Services, and I unfortunately also need to apologize. I have not gotten much momentum there. I did a tiny bit of internet research, but does not count because I didn't make any real progress there. And I haven't, DeAndre and I have not yet talked about social services. So that is on my to-do list. August just got away from me a little bit. And if I'm being totally honest, I was thinking this meeting was next week because I'm used to Labor Day being the start of September. And I'm like, I've got 1 more week. I can do this. Oh no, I don't. So I very much apologize. I'll get on the ball with that. And we can all come back in October and have made some real good progress here. So, but I certainly don't want to brush over those. Does anyone have any comments, suggestions, or thoughts on city facilities or social services? Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and move to our next agenda item, which is updates from the Human Relations Commission Department. So Director Alan Abraha, if you would like to. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Commissioner Price. I appreciate that. Well, with respect to the department, I can say that my staff is happy to be cooperating with and participating in some training that's available to city employees. It's actually called the DEI 3x3 Summer Conversation Series. And as a part of that training, city employees are being afforded the opportunity to be trained in the area of LGBTQIA+ matters. And so this training is something that is a 3-part training. And again, it's only available to city employees, so it's an internal training. And we were happy to see that this was something that city employees had an interest in and wanting to learn more. And so that is something that is ongoing. Jamie, do you happen to know those dates off the top of your head? Or do you have those handy? Because I know that we just finished up some other training pertaining to race relations. And so do you have those dates?
I do. I have it that it starts next Wednesday and it's the following 2 Wednesdays. So the 8th, 15th, and 22nd.
Yes, thank you, Jamie.
And it's a lunch and learn.
Yes, lunch and learn. That is correct. And so that is something, again, that not just my staff, but all city staff may avail themselves to. So we're really excited about that because it is a first. It is a first for city government to have this type of training on this level. So just FYI for you all in terms of what the department is doing, in addition to trying to make sure we provide some support for this subcommittee. Mir, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. That sounds really exciting. And I was just thinking about the conversation that we were having in the housing subcommittee, where we were just talking about training possibilities for local shelters and other folks. Who's doing the training, and how is this the sort of training that might also be applicable to, I don't know, any of the businesses or to sort of other people that we're talking about in the city across the city of Winston-Salem?
Well, we are going to, what I'd like to do before I even speak to that is to actually go through this training to see what it's like and to see if it could be applicable and appropriate. Because if it is, certainly we can follow up with those particular trainers. But we just don't know enough about that right now. We weren't the ones who contracted for this particular trainer. And so I would like to be able to just kind of assess that so that I can make an informed recommendation to you all.
Great. And so it's live in person, or is it video or
virtual?
Virtual. Okay.
It is virtual. All of them have been virtual.
Okay. But it's not like a video module training. It's like interactive, synchronous.
It's interactive, live trainers. Yeah, you can ask questions, and we have breakout groups and all of that. So it's been pretty engaging so far.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like if it is something that is good, or maybe could be tweaked, or just noting like what the particular expertise of people are, if it's sort of general LGBTQ competence, or, if the stuff that we would need in some of these more specific arenas, might be not a 101, but might be like a 201, or might be a 101 plus a, module 105, because it has to be about some specific thing. But it seems like this, just assessing that could be really useful to some of the other things that we've talked about. Thank you.
Right, you're welcome. And see, I'm wondering if it's pertaining to the workplace per se, or if it's more general. And if it's more general, then of course we could always tweak it with housing information, because of course in our department, that's our area of specialty is fair housing, and we can talk about that. And we can kind of intertwine that and just, make it our own. We can tailor it to what we need. But I just want to be able to assess as to whether or not it's more generic, or if it's something that is specific to workplace expectations. Councilmember Mundy, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit, because I copied and pasted the descriptions for those particular workshops. On September the 8th, it'll be Foundations, Part 1, the umbrella and sexuality. What does LGBTQ plus stand for? What are the differences and similarities? It sounds very much like a 101 kind of exploration. The second week is the umbrella and gender. It will specifically explore gender-centered identities, realities, dynamics, struggles, and strengths within and around the LGBTQ plus community. The final is what now, with the understanding developed in the first two sessions. We will discuss the challenges identified in the first two sessions and the steps we can take as a community to alleviate those challenges and create a more racially just, inclusive, and liberating Winston-Salem.
Thank you. See, that sounds very promising. It doesn't sound like they're just specific to the workplace. It sounds more community-based. But definitely still, we'd like to assess it just to kind of get a feel. So that was all I really had for the departmental updates, and commissioners who are on the call. I don't know if you have any updates that you would like to share, Commissioner Price, Commissioner Thompson.
I don't believe I do. Melissa?
Okay.
I wonder if I might ask a question of the commissioners or director. One thing I've been looking at is I was very excited to see the non-discrimination ordinance pass, and I was excited to see it pass in a number of places. I think there have been a dozen municipalities across North Carolina that have passed such an NDO, and it kind of looks different from municipality to municipality, city to county. Like different places are doing it a little bit differently. And I wondered if, I feel like the subcommittee's work is going to be over before the implementation of the NDO goes into effect and has been in effect for a while to kind of assess it. And I wondered if the HRC could just commit to like a year out after it's been implemented, maybe in 2023, something like that. Like take a look at the metric for Winston-Salem, compare it to the metrics of the other city, and just see if I know our enforcement mechanism wasn't quite as strong or quite as robust as some of the other cities. I still think we have a good method in place, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. I just wondered if there'd be an opportunity to just put it on the HRC's schedule for like a year after this has been implemented to kind of reassess, see what kind of results we're getting versus the other municipalities in North Carolina, and see if the enforcement mechanism at that time would need any fine tuning or strengthening or to adopt a different model like some of the other cities have, or if it's working great and we want to celebrate that it's done a good job. Like, I wonder if that's something the HRC could look into after this has been in effect for a while.
That is something that was already planned, Jake. That was something that was already planned. And so the Human Relations Commission has a strategic action plan, and the NDO and all of that is already included. Follow-up and so forth is included on the HRC strategic action plan. So that's something they'd already planned for. They actually passed their strategic action plan last month. So they have that covered. So definitely there will be a monitoring mechanism in place and a way to measure to see how things are going. And that's something also I think that has been said to council as well, that there would be some follow-up.
Oh, that's excellent. And I shouldn't be surprised. It's such a great team. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, and that's always a good question. I mean, that's a very good point. Because if you don't follow up on these things, it's very easy to lose track of them. And then all of a sudden it's not working the way you thought it was going to work. And so, yes, Councilmember Mundy.
Director Alan Abraham, I advised the group, I think while you were on the phone, that one of the reasons we delayed the implementation a little bit is because you were going to beef up your resources within the Human Relations Department. Is that correct? Did I get that correct, that you're going to hire 2 new positions, one for enforcement and one for outreach and communication?
You know what, Councilmember Mundy, please forgive me. And, you know, I didn't have on my Director Alan Abraham hat as well as I should have, because when I did the updates for the department, that should have been the first thing I thought about, and it so was not. So yes, everybody, that's huge news. Huge. So thank you, and to Councilmember Mundy for leading the charge and all of the City Council. Yes, we do have 2 positions that will be filled in the coming months that will focus on the NDOs. And so they'll be focused on employment and on public accommodations. Yes, Councilmember Mundy, one will focus on outreach and education, and the other position will focus on mediation initially. Because, you know, right away, the enforcement piece, like whether we have penalties and all of that, that's not going to be an immediate part, as Jake alluded to earlier, of the whole process. That is going to come a little bit later after our city attorney has had more time to research the authority that we have for penalties and things like that. But and she also wants time to be able to see how things are going, because she may have to think about some staff changes as well. And so, yes, that is something that we will be doing, and we are anticipating being able to go out and train businesses, organizations, individuals on what our NDOs say. What is it that they address? What do they speak to? And so definitely that is huge. So that is one thing that we'll be doing with that position. And like I said, the other position, we are thinking that we would have someone in place already who could take on mediations. If someone comes to us and they're having a problem on the job, or say they walk into a hotel or a store and they feel like they've been discriminated against based on those protected classes. One ordinance has, I think, 19 protected classes. The other one has like 18. And so if one of those protected classes is triggered, then they would have a way to come in and request mediation immediately. Now, the investigation piece would be a little farther out in terms of filing an actual complaint, because again, the city attorney needed a little more time to be able to get some things together. And also we are wanting to work as closely with the EEOC as possible so that perhaps we can eventually have an understanding or agreement with the EEOC, which would state that when somebody comes to us and they file a complaint, that it would be dual filed, not only with the city of Winston-Salem, but also with the EEOC, so that there would be a federal complaint going at the same time that a local complaint would be. And that would complement what we do with our fair housing discrimination complaints. We currently do that. We have dual file complaints. What that means is whatever the allegation is, it violates not only our local fair housing law, but it violates the federal fair housing law. And our local law is substantially equivalent, or it mirrors what the federal law protects. And it would be the same thing with this. So yes, that is exactly what is happening right now, Councilmember Mundy. Thank you so much. Thank you for nudging me. Did anyone have any questions? Yes, Mir.
Hi, this is really exciting. And I just had a question, and maybe this relates to the language of compelling that we were talking about before, maybe not. But you know, when there's like certain kinds of laws and then you see them like framed on the walls of some businesses or like government offices, is any of this the kind of thing that would appear like in businesses or government offices, like, you know, hanging on the wall, where then people who are in there, customers, you know, the public could see it? Because I'm just thinking about how the broad outreach goes, but also how a business or government office might be sort of saying, all are welcome here. You know, this is what that means. But yeah, and I don't know when something goes on the wall, or if that's some version of that might be maybe part of the outreach or training or public education.
I think that's an awesome idea. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the equal housing opportunity little logo, you know, the house with the little lines. And so, you know, HUD has that. So, you know, I'm not even sure that the EEOC has anything that's equivalent to that. And I don't know the extent of how far we could go locally with having something like that, but I think that's an awesome idea. I really do. So that could be something that we could explore, because remember, this is all uncharted territory. This is all new to us, to everyone. And so that is something that definitely could be put on the table for consideration. Hi, Maris, did you have a question?
A comment. Yeah, I think that kind of falls in line with what I was thinking about training. You know, as we've been discussing training, it definitely seems like it could be applicable across more groups than just housing and so forth. And that, you know, and perhaps there could be some invitation into the training for, you know, healthcare providers, for teachers, for whoever, any and everybody, right? Like, you can come and participate, bring a group, participate, and, you know, walk away with these stickers or these posters that you put up to say, you know, you are trained and you're, you know, you support, kind of like the safe space icons that we see around
Yes.
places and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
To me, this feels all kind of linked together in a way that may not be, that may be more about the encouragement of participation as opposed to the compelling. If we're limited with that compelling language, you know, this could be more about the ways that we encourage. And I think it definitely goes across all these different subgroups, right? Like it would, any institution across our community could be invited into, you know, step up and send a team through this training.
I totally agree with you. I think you're absolutely on point. Right now, for instance, what we do with our fair housing training is whenever someone goes through the training, they get one of our fair housing certificates. And that's totally local. It's nothing that's, you know, from HUD. It's something that we created and we do. And it's something that people can hang on the wall saying that they have gone through this training. And perhaps we could issue that for organizations. And right now we do it for individuals. And I think we might have done it for organizations too as a whole, but certainly we do it for individuals. And maybe that's something that we can kind of play off of and develop, for this. And secondly, when I mentioned these positions, and, one of them I said was about outreach, the outreach position is going to be expected to help to develop training modules. That's one of the responsibilities of that position. And so when they go out and they're speaking to organizations, businesses, or whomever, they will have a training something already in place, a PowerPoint or whatever. They're going to already have that in place so that it's something that'll be portable and that could be presented, like you said, in any venue, more or less. It can go to whatever audience is there for that day. And so it could be tailored. I'm picturing something that could be tailored if necessary, like we said, for the shelters, Jake, we're talking about all of that. We could kind of tailor it for that, or we could in turn just make it very general and generic so that it could be applicable to anyone in the community or any entity in the community. So that's a part of what that position is going to be doing. Big part is developing training. And so we definitely solicit and welcome your input in terms of certain things that you would like to see in that type of training. What are some highlights? What are some important things that you think need to be included in a good training that's based on LGBTQ? What would you envision? But, of course, the training is not going to be just on LGBTQ. We can have that specialized module, but we're also going to have an overall module that talks about employment law, that talks about public accommodations law. And so, like I said, one of them has like 18 protected classes, the other one has 19. So we're talking about protected hairstyles, veteran status, pregnancy, race, color, national origin, religion. I mean, it goes on and on. And so ideally, it would be nice to have a training for each of those protected classes of persons. But of course, that's going to take time. So we would just start off with an overview hitting on discrimination in general, but we would make LGBT one of the priority areas, given all that we know, all the challenges that we know that are going on, we could, certainly make that one of the more priority areas to develop. Does that address your question, Amaris? Does that kind of get to what you?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's, because I was wondering at one point if we needed a training breakout group, right? Because it seems to be so broad and across all these different groups, but it seems as though that's work that would be captured by your department, and we would just need to, maybe find ways to integrate within that instead of, trying to own that separately.
Well, I would want you all to be a key part of helping to develop that particular training module. I'll be frank with you, and we would want to run things by you. We want you to provide information to us, especially if you see some best practices or you've been through some trainings and you're like, oh, this should be included in our local training module. Do not feel shy about sharing that information. Because before we even put it out there in the community, that's what you all are really for, is to help to guide the city in what things of this nature should look like. What should they entail? What's necessary? What's not? And so I think we'll be working closely with you all on that once we get this position on board. And that should be in the coming months. Like I said, we're working with HR as I speak to get the positions graded so that I can put them online to post them. And in a perfect world, and in Wanda world, I'm picturing these people being on board by November. Now, I may be overly ambitious, but because the ordinance is going to effect come January, we need to have those people on board before January. And that's pretty quick for government speak, but I just feel like that's something we need to really do.
Got you. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's all I had, Commissioner Price, honestly. Thanks to Councilmember Mundy. I didn't even know I had all that, but I'm glad. I'm so glad he reminded me. So thank you.
Very good. Okay, well then we will move on to our next item, which is community updates and events. Does anyone have any events they want to kind of get in front of anyone, or any updates that we haven't already spoken of today?
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Hi. No, I don't have I don't have an update or announcement, but I remember at our last meeting, Councilman Mundy mentioned a county commissioner was doing some work to try to do something on the county level. And I was wondering if anyone had an update on that. No? Okay.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't heard.
Hopefully maybe we can get an update at the next meeting.
I can share just a little bit. Like I first reached out to Commissioner Tony McDaniel a while back when we were still working on the NDO at the it was part of the non-discrimination ordinance kind of advocacy group that was trying to push the city in this direction, which the city was already going in. But I think we were just trying to support that and kind of advocate in that direction. And we also started reaching out to the county too. And the county sounded like they weren't at the level of wanting to pass a non-discrimination ordinance, but they were willing to pass some kind of pride or queer inclusive proclamation. And so the last conversations I had, they weren't able to, at the county level, pass it by June. Like when we first started talking in March or April, like we were originally talking about a possible June date for that. And the latest I'd heard was, oh, maybe they could get something done in September, or they weren't sure about it. And so we started talking about October as Queer History Month, since that's kind of like our second biggest month after June Pride Month is LGBTQ or Queer History Month in October. Like that could be a good time to have such a proclamation come out. So the last thing I heard was they were aiming for October. I don't know if that's still going to happen that way, but it did sound like the goal was to get some kind of Pride proclamation, something out from the county level by October. And I know the balance of the county commissioners leans a little more in a more conservative direction than maybe the city council does. And so maybe that informs partially why it's a proclamation rather than an ordinance. But the hope was October, I think.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that update.
Yep.
Anyone else have anything they would like to discuss today?
I can share, while North Star LGBTQ Center hasn't reopened yet, we started doing some events out in the field. We just had a good turnout at our outdoor moonlight screening. We partnered with Muse and Aperture to get that to happen. We're working on some more kind of community events, and we're starting to do at least a virtual safe zone trainings again. So I believe North Star is going to be offering that to the Cross North School here, or get that happening pretty soon. So just be on the lookout. There may be more safe zone trainings. And if I can get my hands on some of those materials, maybe I can share those with this committee as well, just to have yet another example of various training. I haven't done one of the trainings with North Star yet, but I know they are starting to offer them again.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Any other thoughts or updates before we adjourn? Okay, well, thanks everyone for participating and for attending today. We will look forward to an October meeting with lots more updates. And everyone have a great Labor Day weekend and a good month, and we'll talk soon.
Stay safe, everyone. Stay safe.
Yep.
Bye all.
Bye.